Boa noite, Brazil, and good morning, Australia, and hello to everyone joining from elsewhere around the world today. My name is Grace Kennedy, and I'm a research fellow in systems engineering at the University of Wollongong in Australia. Today, we've got a most amazing event planned for you, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone to our forum on hierarchical segregation in teaching and research. We've got a special lineup of speakers who will be examining the evidence around gender gaps in graduate engineering programs in Brazil and looking at some of the specific barriers to gender equity, such as effective advocating on equity, diversity, inclusion matters at universities, and the cultural norms around motherhood and its effect on STEM careers. And then together, we'll explore the next steps in addressing these gaps. In Australia, we're sometimes described as both a young but also ancient country. Today, we are a multicultural society of peoples, and we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are situated. We pay our respects to Aboriginal elders, past and present, who are the knowledge holders and teachers, and we acknowledge their continued spiritual and cultural connection to country. As we share knowledge, learning and teaching and research at our university, we also pay respects to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. And so I'm located in Wollongong, and here in Wollongong, we meet on the lands of the Darawal people. And you might well also wish to pay respects to the Indigenous peoples of the lands on which you are, whether you're also in Australia or in Brazil or even in other lands. So for those who might have been at our WREN events in previous years, last year we created a video which was in English and Portuguese. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see that video. But this year, WREN is really taking flight, and we've expanded our network to look at the Southeast Asian countries as well. And so we've been working hard to create this video this year, and we'd like to share that with you. At WREN, we want to achieve gender equity among women and men in engineering and STEM-related fields, and to see a greater participation and retention of women in research and STEM roles over longer careers. Recent studies have found that women only make up between 10 to 20% in engineering fields globally. Our mission is to connect women researchers, share knowledge, create opportunities, and foster collaborations. WREN first began as a bilateral collaboration between Australia and Brazil in 2021. And now, thanks to the Australia-ASEAN Council, we're expanding to a multilateral collaboration within the ASEAN region. The Council's mission is to increase knowledge and promote Australia's interest in Southeast Asia by initiating and supporting activities to enhance understanding and links between people and institutions in Australia and the region. WREN is by women, for women. As a network striving for gender equity, WREN aims to amplify the voices of women in all areas. We look forward to connecting women across the world and sharing with you our journey as we do so. Join us. Leading the way for women and international collaboration in engineering. So that was a wonderful new video that really celebrates all the members that we've already had and our new members in our network this year. So if you haven't already joined, then what are you waiting for? Our membership is totally free, and you can sign up on our website, which is at thewren.global. And within the members portal, you can control your own profile, and you can search for international collaborators, research and teaching opportunities, and information and stories around gender equity in women research engineering. You can also raise ideas through blog posts or publicize and celebrate the work of our members.
And we have a wonderful mailing list as well, where you can get your monthly newsletters straight to your email inbox, and that helps you to keep up to date with the latest events and news from the network. Okay, so without further ado, this is our event overview for today. And so first we're going to hear about the work of Professor Julia Mendes and her colleagues at UFOP and the Federal Uni of Juiz de Fora, who evaluated graduate engineering programs across Brazilian universities to uncover the differences between research metrics of male and female professors and their students. And then in response to Professor Mendes' findings, we'll then have a panel with two different perspectives on the problems. Firstly, Professor Shamika Almeida will discuss her research into effective EDI practices at universities in Australia, and Camila Almeida will discuss the topic of motherhood in Brazilian women in science. The panel will be interactive, and we really encourage you to respond to our speakers in the chat and to ask any questions as you need to. And then finally, for the last section of our event, we'll be splitting up into breakout rooms where we'll have a time to discuss each other's experiences around gender inclusion policies, the effectiveness of EDI initiatives, and how we can really start to improve the research conditions for everyone through a diversity of voices. Okay, so first up will be Professor Julia Mendes. She's an assistant professor at the Federal University of Ouro Preto and participates in the graduate programs in civil engineering from both that university and Juiz de Fora. She's a coordinator of the CIDN research group on data science and engineering, and she's currently the Brazilian representative from WREN, where she does an amazing job. Julia has experience in the fields of machine learning applied to construction materials and sustainable sustainable construction. But recently, she has been exploring the areas of education in engineering and gender issues in the academy. So thank you, Julia, over to you.
Thank you, Grace, for the amazing presentation. So I'll start sharing my screen here, just a second. Okay. Presenting. Okay, so you guys can see my screen. So hi, everybody. I'll start presenting our study, Female Participation in Brazilian Engineering Graduate Programs, made by this amazing team of three students, Carolina, Juliane, and Karina, and three professors, Alexandre, Arlene, and me. The inspiration to start this project arose from an assignment on my class of Ethics in Research. Carolina and Juliane brought an article for the class to discuss. The first version of the article you see here, that had been published by Nature Communications, observed that researchers with female advisors had less citations, and then kind of concluded that if you wanted to be more successful in your academic career, you should be advised by a male professor. Obviously, this paper suffered heavy criticism and was then updated and then retracted. But still, it hurts. The authors here, two of them were female, they failed to expose the whole web of cultural and societal aspects behind the citation metrics that they evaluated. We could talk all day about networking challenges, credibility biases, motherhood, and simple old prejudice. But I'll stick to these two concepts here, the glass ceiling and the hierarchical segregation. Historically, the hierarchical division of labor considered men's work more important than women's. Even today, women face these invisible barriers called glass ceilings that prevent them from occupying prestigious places or fields that are considered typically masculine. For example, according to the study from 2018 in the United States, women obtain half of all science and engineering degrees, but they represent only 20% of university professors in these fields. A Brazilian similar study in the Brazilian Center of Agricultural Sciences of the Federal University of Viçosa from 2016 observed that women represented 40% of the students enrolled in the undergraduate courses in 2013, but only 10% of the professors in the same period. According to the authors, the higher the qualification, the lower the number of enrolled women, with the percentage of women decreasing from undergraduate students to masters, and then even more to PhD students. These examples also illustrate very clearly the concept of hierarchical segregation proposed by Rossiter in the 80s that states that the greater the power and prestige of a job, the lower the presence of women in it. And just as a curiosity, it took 179 years between the beginning of engineering courses in Brazil and the formation of the first female in the country. That being said, my team and I were really curious to understand how women performed in the engineering area here in Brazil. So the goal of this work is to analyze the female participation in Engineering 1 graduate courses in Brazil between 2013 and 2020 and evaluate the advisor-advisee metrics by gender. For our foreign watchers here, the Brazilian governmental entity that regulates graduate courses called CAPES, it classifies the graduate programs in the various areas of knowledge. The sub-area Engineering 1 comprises the fields of civil engineering, environmental engineering, and transport engineering, among other minor ones. We focused on these courses because they are evaluated together. So we initially connected the data from all the master's and PhD dissertations from these programs between 2013 and 2020. We started in 2013 because that was the earliest available data. This survey was based on the data reports of the Sucupira platform, which is the CAPES transparency repository. These reports contain the year of the degree, the awarding institution, the title of thesis or dissertation, its level, if it's master's or PhD, the name of the student and his or her main advisor and secondary advisor when applicable. We only consider in this work the main advisor of each work, of each project. The reports, they do not define the gender of the student or the advisor. So to establish the gender, we developed a library of first names with more than 3,000 names, classifying them as male or female. This method has some limitations because it's based only on the first name from the reports without considering individual gender identity or non-binary people. Also, this method does not distinguish between people who might have names typically of the opposite sex. For example, if we found the name Anna, we would classify it as female. So if there's a male named Anna, it would be wrongly classified. However, this strategy is very useful when we need to classify a large number of people, and it has been widely used in the literature. With this process, we obtained and classified 16,131 pairs of students and advisors. On the second stage, we analyzed the scientific production of 1,178 students who received their PhD in Engineering 1 from 2013 to 2016. We chose this period from 2013 to 2016 to include the academics who had received their PhDs at least 5 years before the analysis, to give them some time to grow their careers, and then we analyze them. And we carry out this analysis in August of 2021. So we downloaded the academic curriculum available in the latest platform of all these PhDs and classified their metrics. So to classify the scientific production of the evaluated CVs, we adopted the QUALIS system used by CAPES. This system assesses the quality of articles and other scientific productions based on the relevance and impact factor of the journal in the Brazilian scenario. Because we performed this study in 2021, we had the classification that went from A1 to C, with A1 being the highest classification. We know that there are several criticisms involving the use of QUALIS to assess the scientific production of individuals, because it was made to assess the programs. However, this metric is well known and is widely used in selection processes for scholarships, postdoctoral internships, research grants, and hiring of professors. So we cannot deny its importance, and we use it anyway. Out of these analyzed CVs, we chose to focus on the people, the PhDs that became academics. They pursued academic career. So we excluded from our study the people who had never mentored any undergrad or graduate student. Because in Brazil, even lecturers at the beginning of their careers are allowed and encouraged to supervise undergrad and graduate projects. So we established that those people who did not advise any student after earning their PhDs were not pursuing an academic career. So after these exclusions, we had 659 CVs remaining. So let's go to our results. Initially, from those 16,000 pairs, we observed that the number of students who received master's degree and PhD degrees in Engineering 1 grew a lot between 2013 and 2019, decreased a little bit in 2020, probably because of the COVID. However, when we show it by percentage, the proportion of female and male students remained stable from 2013 to 2020. On average, summing up masters and PhDs, we have women representing around 46% of the students and males 54%. And when we split up by levels, we confirm the hierarchical segregation because the proportion of females as PhD students here, in the last column of each year, is 42% on average, is very lower than the master's students on the medium column, which were 47% on average. Still, 42% and 47% female graduate students in engineering courses can hardly be considered a bad result. The problem really starts when we start to analyze the number of female professors. This graph here records the male and female professors who had completed at least one supervision of master's or PhD projects in that year. As you can see, female professors, they represent on average 28% of the advisors, and they grew a little bit between 2013 and 2020. They dropped here hardly in 2020, COVID doing its job to women. But you can see that the proportion of this growth is really modest. And this result indicates like a grave situation, because we don't see the decrease of women in graduate students is not being reflected in a greater female participation in higher positions. We have lots of women getting their PhDs, getting their masters, but we don't have much more women becoming professors and at graduate courses. So here, the next figure presents the ratio of advisees to advisors according to the advisor's gender. The result shows that on average, both male and female supervise about 2 students each, but male advisors supervise on average 13% more students. And we know that all of this entails a lot of more publications and metrics for grants and so on. One of the reasons why male professors supervise more graduate students than female professors may be linked to the women's dual career in the university and at home, which means that many women have less time to devote to mentorship and research in general. And we have other numbers here that prove it as well. In Brazil, researchers, they can be awarded productivity grants by the National Council for Scientific and Technological Development, CNPq. It's a very famous and very disputed grant scholarship called PQ. And I studied from 2019, analyzed the gender distribution of these grants. In 2017, men were the majority among scientists that were awarded productivity grants at all levels, representing 62% at the first level and reaching 77% at the highest level. The authors, Barros and Silva, also observed that female scientists usually have children earlier than male ones. They complete their PhDs at a later age and they are awarded productivity grants later too. The authors also found that the birth of children had a greater impact on women's scientific careers than men's. Camila, here, a researcher from Parents and Science Movements, will talk a little bit more about it after my presentation. So returning here, the next graph, we related the advisor genders to the gender of the student that they supervised, combining everyone. So we divided the pairs into female, 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 male, 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 female, and male, male. So here, like female advisor supervising female students, female advisor supervising male students, male advisor supervising female students, and male advisor supervising male students. And we can observe that female advisors tend to work more with female students and male advisors more with male students. This tendency of women working with women and men working with men was also observed in other studies. This is not the first time. And we all know that the mentorship process is vital in the education of graduate students and in their scientific careers. Female advisors, they can act as role models to be followed by female students. And some authors have verified that female students who were mentored by female advisors were more likely to become university professors. Therefore, hiring more female professors might indirectly increase female representation in universities, which is something that we all know how important it is. Now, when talking about the metrics of each gender, we have some grim results. from the CVs of those 660 PhD receivers who became academics, according to our criteria, we counted how many PhD supervisions, how many master supervisions, how many here, PhD on Black, masters, undergrad supervisions they had up to 2021, as well as how many medium impact here and high impact publications they had. Okay, among the categories considered in this analysis, the male and female performances are only similar in the terms of mentorship of undergrad students. When we talk about supervision of PhD and master students, women supervise much more than, men supervise much more than women, and they also publish more regardless of the impact factor. So this figure proves that the greater the prestige of the supervision or the publication, the lower the numbers among female researchers. So this was, I think, our most sad result. But as we approach here our last result, at least we have a light in the end of the tunnel. We verified again the metrics of these 660 PhD receivers, but now we split them up by the gender of the advisor, not their own gender. And we observed no clear trend in scientific production of those who were supervised by male or female advisors. So even though women are only 28% of the advisors in the Engineering 1 graduate programs, students supervised by them have an academic performance similar to those advised by men. So wrapping up here in summary, we concluded that women were on average 47% among master's degree receivers and 42% among PhD receivers in Engineering 1, and this proportion is not changing significantly over time. Among the advisors, women were only 28%. They were not growing also, and they were more affected by men because of the COVID pandemic. Men advise 13% more students than women on average, and proportionately, female advisors tend to work more with female students, and male advisors tend to work more with male students. More female academics publish fewer articles regardless of the impact factor and supervise less students than male ones. And gender differences grow as one advances in the academic careers. Like female professors supervise less master's theses and even less PhD dissertations in comparison with their male colleagues. And finally, in the engineering courses studied in this work, the differences in academic metrics are more related to the gender of the student than to the advisor's gender. So it's a lamentable result for female students, but at least it does not support the nonsense confirmation that if you want to be successful, you need a male supervisor. So that's what we took from this research, is that we have to increase female participation as engineering professors for female students to be represented in the academic environment, However, this strategy alone and individual actions alone will not contribute to the permanence of women in research careers. So in addition to feeling represented, public policies must be implemented and designed for women to persist in the academic environment and be able to compete for grants and scholarships on the same level as their male colleagues. So that's it. Thank you all for hearing. Here's all the thank yous, and that's it, Grace. I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was amazing. It was hard-hitting figures and quantitative really evidence here, and I think it's great that there's some positive streaks, but I think there's a lot of other things that needs to happen in society and academic life as a whole. But I think we're going to talk a little bit more around the rest of that in the rest of our talks with our panelists. Before we go into our panel, it'd be really lovely if we could do a little, like, say cheese and take a little photo. So if you're able to, please do put on your video, and then I'll take a screenshot so we can have a nice memento of our events. Okay, so let's move on to the next step in our event, and I'll just share my screen. Just give me a second. Okay, and so we have two wonderful panelists who are joining us today, and they come from two different perspectives on the issues, but we've asked them today to reflect really on the evidence and what's come out from Julia's research. And so we'll be having a quick talk from Camila Infanger Almeida first. And Camila is a PhD student in political science at the University of Sao Paulo, and she has an MSc in international management at ESPM and a BA in economics and politics from London Metropolitan University. She's a researcher of gender studies with an emphasis on the dynamics of motherhood in the academic careers of women. She's a member of the Parent in Science movement and a research collaborator at the University of Sao Paulo in the Public Policy Research Centre. Thank you, Camila.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I'm just having a quick issue with my laptop charger. So let's hope that the battery I've got is going to be enough for the for the presentation while I get a new charger. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about like the work we've been doing with the parenting science, and also a little bit about my research in parenthood and the impacts over the career of women. Okay. Okay, can you all share my screen? So this first slide is, we have like the drawing of a few female Brazilian scientists. They're all very remarkable. This is what we intend with the inclusion of parenthood in the agenda of women in science. Just a second. I'm just trying to deal with, so to make sure we'll have enough battery. So there we go. So just to talk to prove that this issue, it is still actual and recent. This is a picture of the International Committee to evaluate one of the main grants in Brazil, the grants of the National Institutes of Science and Technology. So in 2016, where are the women in science? Not to mention that everyone is white in a country that over the majority of the people belongs to Black minorities or indigenous. We don't have this, all the populations, the Brazilian population represented in the scientific environment. So this is our parenting science movement. We are 6 years old. We started with the personal experience of Fernanda Stanisławski, a researcher from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. So basically, what we draw from is the idea that motherhood is not included in our academic curriculum. So a few researchers sharing social networks started telling about the experience of having grants denied due to lack, the deceleration and pauses in their productivity. And the pause are precisely in the years of the birth of the children. So they just don't understand how like they can be punished by being a mother, by not being productive during the first year of the children's lives. So we started with like around 6 researchers and professors. Now in the central group we are 19, and we started a couple of years ago during the pandemic ambassadors program, where we have now the presence of altogether 91 researchers across Brazil. This is really, it's really good experience, as I was speaking to Julia before this event, to understand the capillarity of the movement and how it is important for us to understand the local needs of the research mothers and how we can support them. Because once the movement became famous, we started being asked for support by researchers in small communities and in areas that we didn't know the reality of. So that was good now to have the ambassadors to have a point of contact in various areas in Brazil. We are very active in social media. This is both my children, and we try to engage the community through the hashtags. So we started, I don't know if you can see from my t-shirt here. So we started with this hashtag, which means maternidade no Lattes. So Lattes is our academic curriculum organized by the Science and Technology and Innovation Ministry. So we actually strived including the maternity leave field in our academic curriculum. So now our funders know that we've had children, we've given birth in such and such years, so they understand any difference or any pauses in our productivity. This hashtag that I show in this slide is Maternidade na Sucupira, which means the platform that organizes the post-graduation courses in Brazil. So they don't still, they don't yet recognize the motherhood pauses and leaves. So in the programs, when you talk about like post-graduation students, so PhD or master students, when they take the 4 months off, it's not counted at the end of the courses. So for instance, for masters in Brazil, we have 24 months. So you still have the same 24 months, even though you have a child during this period. So what if the program decides to actually grant the 4 months at the end and turn this into 28 months? Then the program is punished by the mark. So it's not assessed positively because it shows delays in the entitlement. I don't know if the entitlement would be the right word in English, but in granting titles for to the students. So we're still like fighting for the inclusion of motherhood in the assessment of the post-graduation courses. Here is a little bit of the science. So just thinking about the experience and how you might be able to reproduce in Australia or elsewhere. The initial step of the movement is gathering data. So when first started studying the mothers in academia, we didn't know like who they were, how many there were, and what kind of like support system we had. So talking about engineering specifically, we see that more recently and gradually more and more, we have seen and we have evidence that the impact of parenthood is much greater in women, and it does affect our progress in the academic career. So here is a little bit of the scenario in the Brazilian science. So we have the scissors effect. So for the ones that are not familiar with, the scissors is because it's the shape of a scissor. So we start here on the top. So if you look at technical courses, women represent 57%. And as the prestige, or as the level of the academic level grows, our participation decreases. So we go to 53%, 45%. When you go to the graduate courses, looking at the bottom line, we are only 41%. And then as we go up towards post-graduation, we become lower and lower represented. So we have 36%. And when you go to the other end of the screen, where you see Minister of Science and Technology, we've never had a woman there. We never had a woman of president of CNPq, which is the council, the research council, the main research council in Brazil. And we've never had anyone as president of ABC, which is the Brazilian Science Academy. So as you see, this is effect is real and is still permanent, not permanent, present in Brazil. So what is it due to? Maternity penalty, harassment, implicit bias, and gender stereotype, as I'm going to talk a little bit further. Another phenomenon is the leaky pipeline. So also following the scissor effect, we understand that we do start with a big population of women at the beginning of academic career, but due to many reasons, we start dropping out or falling off, I might say, from the pipeline that leads us to a successful academic career. So this is where we find motherhood real impact. That you see that the biggest one here at the bottom, I don't know if you can see my indicator, we see that the motherhood penalty is what actually takes a lot of women out of the academic ladder. So how do you understand the impact of motherhood really? So we see that, and this is based on actual scientific evidence, that women younger than 30 show higher productivity rates than men who present study records at this stage. So what happens at the 30s that we say is that the heavy decade between the 30s and the 40s, The 30s seem to push women back in science, as shown by low productivity rates. And this is where we begin to develop slower and more irregularly than men. And why is it due to? To the reproduction timing. So as you see here, this is from data from 2016. This is the Brazilian population of post-graduation students or academic title holders. So we have on the first bars the masters, and the other one PhD holders. You see that the longest bars, so the biggest population of PhD holders, they're aged between 35 and 39 years old. As everyone knows here, this is when women show the lowest fertility rate. We start having a decline in our fertility rate from 35 years old. So what we joke about is that the Turner and the biological clocks don't run in the same time zone. And our funders and our decision makers don't understand that when they decide on policies towards the inclusion of women. We need to consider motherhood, because this is the age when we are most reproductive and when we are able to decide on family plans. But on the other hand, they don't want us to slow down our academic career, or rather than cause problems to a research group or maybe to a post-graduation program. So as I said before, we from this moment onwards, I studied a period of low productivity coincides with the most likely age for motherhood and caretaking responsibility, remembering that not only children take hours of the women can dedicate to academic work, but also the care work in general. So caring for people in need, maybe like sick people at home, for the elderly. So it's really important to understand the role of women in the care work as well. So this is what we call the maternity wall. So this sort of impact, they run through a logic of male roles, which are the hegemonic male model of making science. I'm going to go quickly over this, but we have a few parameters that show that science wasn't made for women, and wasn't made even less for women their mothers. So we still have traditional gender norms prevailing. So they understand that we are the primary caregivers. Our childbearing is expected to be postponed after post-graduation studies. So when you're already like maybe possible to get a job at the academy, or maybe universities, or even in the private market. So when you're too old maybe to have children, or you have like feel difficulties to pursue a family plan, they do expect us to have total time availability. So in the pandemic times, this was even worse. So we us who are mothers, we need to follow like both routines, our academic routine, the children's routines. So sometimes like meetings are scheduled for the evening at night, or maybe we have problems in the mornings, or a lot of travelings that we are not able to do with children. So this expectation of total availability sometimes not very feasible for women. And the last one is maternal body, is when from the moment you are pregnant, you are not considered the same professional as you were before, the same academic as you were before. You're suddenly like covered with this fragile perception over you, and people just, especially the ones that actually decide on career progression, may think they can't be dedicated fully to academia as you have children, and the whole stigma persists over women who ought to have children. Maternity wall is then the effect of motherhood in one's career. It's the perception that there is our decisions that on maternity and child care that determines the impacts that we're going to have. But this isn't true. The reasons are not our decision to become mothers, but rather the part-time employment, a poor childcare system, lack of family and friendly policies towards work-life balance. So if children and having children start being considered like a social issue rather than a gender issue, then our demands and our careers may be more respected. Then just like a few other aspects of motherhood and family penalty. We do see difficulties integrating work and family responsibilities, less overall success, and satisfaction in professional careers, the invisibility of the carers, and reduced productivity. So again, when having children was considered like an individual's choice, and it's not the problems of the state, of the university, or the funding bodies to solve. But we do have reproductive rights. It is a social issue, and we should be supported by a public policy. So talking about the work of parenting science, we did a publication on calls, they include maternity. And I brought a couple of examples of international institutions. So we have this one from New Zealand, in which they include an extra year in the metrics that decide on the productivity of women. So if the applicant is a primary caregiver of a dependent child, it is able to extend the period of eligibility by 2 years per child. And here we also include adopted children or children by birth of the researcher. So we do include the LGBT community, and we include all sorts of families. So the idea here is not to be conservative or to have a heteronormative perspective behind this, but rather absorbing and including all families in the plurality of the agenda. We do have an example of the Swiss and the European Commission decision. And our favorite one is the one from a Brazilian university here, who does the correction factor. So the actual mark of the researcher graders, the ones that are mothers of children under 5 years old, is multiplied by 1.2. So in that sense, then the woman has is an affirmative action for them to be included, and considering they have less time to study, less time to dedicate to academic work. I have here practical recommendations, but I guess we can use, and they are the part of the event in which we're going to do working groups, I suppose. But we recommend re-entry programs. So for women returning from maternity leave, on-site childcare. So if you have like the university childcare, it's much more feasible for women to actually be present to the university. We do need support to undergraduate students. So we have a lot of very, very young women getting pregnant at university and dropping out. We do support scholarship for substitutes during maternity leave, so that way the research is not left out and still have continuation during the leave, and reduce workload upon return. Then I'm talking about administrative work at university. And here I take you, everyone. Sorry for the rush, but the battery went off gladly. And I leave here my email for us to be in touch afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Camila. I'm glad your battery held out. It was getting a bit red towards the end, but you're still with us, which is great. And so I think we might move, before we do any question and answers, we might move straight into Shamika's section. So I'll just introduce Shamika. So Shamika's worked in the corporate sector in banking, apparel, travel, and recruitment consulting industries for over 10 years before she went to academia. Her lived corporate experiences of discrimination in the workplace motivated her greatly to seek answers to why employers might be hesitant to recruit skilled migrants in the Australian workplace. In 2007, she undertook her PhD at the University of Sydney to really get to grips with and find answers to the real life experiences. Shamika's passionate about giving a voice to the underdogs in society and using research and education to create awareness regarding exclusionary behaviour in the workplace and identifying opportunities to create an inclusive society. Thank you. Shamika, over to you.
Thank you, Grace, and everybody here. I really appreciate you taking the time. I want to first say acknowledge country and elders past, present, and emerging. I'm very committed to truth-telling, healing, respect, and reciprocity, and those are the core values I do care about. Just a little bit more is, I came into academia as an much older woman after my children were in high school. And so I always classified myself as the oldest junior for a very long time in academia. And I'm also a person of color, first generation migrant, and very rarely do I see people who are like me in senior leadership. So I want to change that. If one thing I can do is change that, in the next 10 years, we need to have more diversity at senior leadership. So I know we were talking about how women, as Camila was talking about, women being parents until the age of, say, 40. And then what happens to us? What happens to women after 40, 45? We have to face menopause. So we are constantly, either we are parents or we face menopause and we're taking care of our elders. So we're constantly juggling so many things. And so I think we are tremendous. I think we all deserve a tap on the shoulder to say, well done for surviving and succeeding in this industry. So I want to ask a couple of questions from you all. How many of you are parents? So you have children, or you're a carer for your parents or a child with a disability or something like that? Is there anything, could you just in the chat say, yes, I'm a carer or a parent? If you can just, so that we can understand as a community how many of you are parents or carers from the 20 of us. So I am, but I have older children now. Or even hands up. Do you think that majority of us are either parents or carers, or no? Minority. I can only see one at the moment. How about people, are you first in the family to complete education at the university? So we say first in the family to complete a tertiary education. Any one of you are first in the family? How about, do you come from a minority ethnic group? Do you, so for example, how about thinking back to school as well as at university? Okay, let's take the university. Wherever you're working or studying, are you in the popular group? What I mean popular means the ones who are with the insiders, the favorites, the ones who are adored and always given opportunities? Or are you someone who is, I call myself an out-group person. So I'm not in the in-group. I'm not the popular group. I'm an introvert. So I don't socialize much. So, it depends. Yeah, it depends who you are asking. Yes, we are popular with people who are like-minded like us. But are you in the in-group with your senior leaders? How many of you go for coffees with your leaders, or lunch, or socialize with your leaders? How many of you think your senior leaders, your executive deans, heads of schools really know you as a person and who you are? I remember I used to work in another university where we had two people of color who looked like me. They would use our names, haphazardly, because I'm a person of color, she was a person of color, so we were all Shamikas, because to them there was no differentiation. So you would be, if you would have a lot more barriers and obstacles to succeed if you are not in the mainstream group. If you're the minority group, wherever you are, like the women engineers in STEM, you would have it's the same thing. So why am I passionate? So I'm thinking, can I ask another question then? Have you ever stood up for somebody else? Have you ever created an opportunity for another person who you knew it would help someone, introduce somebody else, added somebody to your research project, gave advice, information about an opportunity? Did you share information? Did you advocate for somebody when someone was finding fault with that person? Yes, so I think we are all probably advocates and equity diversity practitioners. In our own little ways, we do small things to make it a better world. I know Julia and Camila talked about the challenges, but I think we need to celebrate where we are now and how we are all tend to be advocates. Look at this beautiful group of people who are spending time to talk. So I feel we are creating a community of like-minded people. So that's a great start. So I'm just going to talk, is it okay, Grace, if I talk a little bit about what my role is in the university? Yeah. So every faculty in our university has an Associate Dean Equity, Diversity and Inclusion. So there are 5 of us in the university, and we are very different to each other, but also very passionate about making a positive difference. So at university level, we are looking at what are the barriers to promotion. And if you look at most universities, you, as correctly as Julia said, we have less women at senior levels, less diversity at senior levels. So what is the problem with that? The problem is when we have mainstream views of who is who should be provided opportunities, who should be recruited, who should be provided succession planning. It's very mainstream ideas. We have to have people who are different at leadership to bring diversity of thought. So at a recent promotion committee meetings, I would highlight when others might have said, this candidate has an issue. Someone with a different voice needs to bring in alternative views. So our university has introduced the concept of relative to opportunity. That means, like Camila, who said, motherhood. If someone takes a fractional appointment after having a child, illness, taking care of people, there are so many relative to opportunity situations that impact us. So when we go for promotion and a panel looks at the application, we look at the context of the candidate. What relative to opportunity situations should we take into consideration when looking at promotion? And I think that made a major difference this year. The great thing was people told things, declared things in their promotion application, which made me feel, oh, wow, they trust us. They trust us with this sensitive information. Because if I ask you, how many of you pretend to be or don't show your real self at work? So if you're a mother with 3 children or carer responsibility, do you pretend not to sometimes because you might be not given opportunities because who you are? Right? That's a shame. If we can adapt and adjust the way of thinking of the leaders. We can change. We need to change the mindset. So one of the leaders in our faculty, she's a mom, and she said, I can't do meetings after school, after 3 p.m. and I need to have meetings during school hours. So that's a major change we need to introduce. Have meetings during school hours so that parents can take care of their children. They don't have to juggle. I know we have Zoom meetings, but still, we need to have that flexible work roles. If we change the mindset that moms have to do certain care responsibilities, but they'll come back whatever time and do the work that needs to be done. So we are very, very fortunate in our university. We have a woman who's a vice chancellor. She's changed the mindset of the university quite a bit to change how people think and promote or support people. In my faculty, particularly in relation to early career researchers and mid-career researchers, we have mentoring. We have a mentoring program for early careers, but also mid-careers. Now, you know, women particularly get stuck at level C. That is, level C means they don't go to professorship. The transition is very low. So we have to, men and women can get stuck at mid-level. So we do have mentoring, one-on-one targeted mentoring. I also organize, how many of you have actually met your most senior leader one-on-one, other than for formal things, informally for a chat? Say a dean of your faculty. How many of you had a chat with a dean of a faculty, got a chance to sit and have an informal conversation? Right. Now, this is where we need to break it. We need to connect the senior leaders with the ground level people so that they get to know people person to person rather than just through whatever is published online. So we organize in our faculty small 3 to 4 people to come and have coffee with the dean and get to know them informally. It's not about what work do you do, what publishing do you do, but generally getting to know as humans, as colleagues. And that way we change the mindset of the leaders connecting. There's a big barrier between the ground level and the senior people. We need to change that. If we don't change that, this will continue to go on. So it's really important connecting, bringing, I am trying to campaign to have reverse mentoring for senior leaders. That means every senior leader should be mentored by somebody at the ground level. Because we have enough mentoring, but senior leaders need to be mentored to know the reality of the real issues happening in the ground level. And I think that could start to change, but I can't do it on my own. So the 5 of us, we do different things and we take challenges and we lead. So I believe in this aspect of flocking. If we are to flourish, we need to flock as a group, help each other. And I love your symbol is that WREN, the bird, and the voice of the bird. But imagine if all of us become advocates for each other and flock and support each other, we could achieve wonders. I'm going to finish that there because I know you want to have time for the discussion, but please reach out. I'm happy to connect with anybody and support.
Thank you so much, Shamika. Wow, you can really feel the passion coming through the screen with you as well, and in fact with Julia and Camila as well. Thank you so much to all our speakers. So what we're going to do now is, I think we've got time for maybe just a quick roundtable question for our panelists and speakers. And so I'm going to ask the same question to everybody, and it is women in the minority in STEM fields in particular. This is a problem that we've known about, for decades, right? And in most cases, we're starting to see improvements, but they're not nearly the 50-50 that we strive to attain. And so whilst the graduate levels are increasing, and we saw in almost most of the talks today that it's starting to, have this attrition or leaky pipeline of women in their careers in STEM, if the right strategies and policies could be employed now, when do you think we might be able to get closer to parity, and why? It's a bit of a tricky question, but let's see how it goes. So, Camila, are you there? She might be flicking over her laptop to get one with battery. So maybe we'll go to Julia first.
I think I'm the least experienced here because I'm also the youngest one, in career level and stuff. But maybe I'm hopeful too, because I think if we start implementing it now, if we think like the master's and PhD cycle are usually 4 to 5 years, maybe 6 in the Brazilian scenario. Maybe we can get this done by like a few of these cycles. If we can get enough women to get in, to continue to persist, and then to be heard later on. And if I also think that we are in the STEAM areas, women are usually few, and the men, especially older men, are usually a lot. If we think about the picture that Camila showed about the jury for the CNPq grant, most of them had white hair, and it's great, it's experience. But I mean, can we promote changes if we don't change the structure of who's in charge? Yeah, that's it. So
yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because we always say, generations are starting to change and cultures start to change, but have we seen anything in the last 20 years really moving? And so, yeah, I think, like with problems with climate change, we hear a lot about, we have these targets for certain dates and this, that, and the other, but do we see those in gender equity initiatives or not? So Shamika, what's your opinion on this?
Change is slow, but we need to have men championing for women. We can't do it on our own. We need them side by side fighting the fight. We also need women to stop acting the way we don't want them to. But I know, I remember, Julia, you said that there are women tend to advise more women, and then men seem to be having more PhD supervisions. I can say that I do have more males than females, but I was never asked to supervise. Women and men did not come to me for supervision because I was not senior enough. I didn't look the part of a professor. I didn't look a white male professor. So it is always the status reputation when students go. So I think we need to change the mindset of men and women and all genders, so that we don't stick to traditional norms.
Yeah, I think to get change, I think everyone needs to be on board, right? Okay, so Camila, I'm not sure if you heard the question or not when you were changing over, but we just got time for one question, unfortunately, but we asked the same question to everybody, and it was really about how we've known about the problems with gender equity for quite some time, and we've got some gains, but at the same time we haven't seen gains. So when do you how do we get there, and when do you think we might be able to get to essentially like the ideal of maybe parity?
Well, I think we need to think about all the actors behind what we construct as the academic or the academic environment or the academia. So I was listening to Shamika talking about like, oh, what's the face of science? So a woman is not a scientist. A young woman is not a scientist. A woman like a black woman, indigenous woman is not a scientist. So maybe we need to also start breaking the perceptions in our own minds, because we see a lot of young girls starting post-graduation looking for male professors to be their supervisors. So we need to understand that a lot of things are in political and public policy, in the ways that we actually we have a saying here in Brazil. There's some sort of policies we need to just throw down, like not without chewing. Like we just need to force them to understand that maternity leave is important, for instance, or we need for them to understand that we need to have a diapers changing in the bathroom at the university, or we need to have a place for women to take the milk. How do you say? To extract the milk from the extractor if she decides to keep breastfeeding and stuff. So they might not agree, but we shouldn't care. We need to go to still keep our way forward and to see if we can, like, we're never going to get parity. I think that's a very strong word, because they're never going to give birth. They're never going to like have the same needs as us, but we need the conditions to be as close as possible or to absorb the impact. But like something very like pickled to talk about, but I think is important here, is the generation conflict. So the biggest obstacles sometimes are imposed by older women, so senior women at academia. I don't know if you agree, but they just tell their very brave, heroic stories. They're like, oh, I was there, didn't have maternity leave. I heard a story at USP of a professor saying that the baby was 1 month old, and then her mother came to university every day and was sitting in the classroom, and she would breastfeed in the meeting, in the breaks, and that's it. She went to work after 1 month, and she said, oh, we didn't have all this like comfortable benefits that you have to stay at home for 4 months. So she's definitely not promoting or trying to fight with us for maternity leave, because she did without. So why would she have it easier? They do the term like that. Why do they make our lives easier if their lives wasn't that easy? So this is what we need to understand sometimes about generational conflict and who is there to make decisions, because us, the young people academia, are not making the most important decisions. So we need to think who are making them.
Yeah, I think it's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it? Because we haven't got enough women in senior leaderships to have our voices, heard and our perspective heard. But we need these women to help to, I guess, to have that voice in decisions that are being made. So it's a little bit chicken and egg in some ways. But thank you so much to all our panelists, and I'm sure everybody online is also very thankful and grateful too. And we could ask so many questions, but we haven't got time. But what we might do is break out into smaller breakout rooms. So let me just share my screen to show you what we're going to do for this last little section. So in the main room, we had myself and Shamika, Parasar and Arisha, and we had a good discussion. We talked about, whether gender equity initiatives are necessarily having the effect that we think that they think they're meant to be having. So we talked about how many of them are very effective, so like the rope statements and things like that. But we also talked about things like where, sometimes women who are successful, sometimes other people say, well, you only got that because you're a woman, right? Because the odds were moved in your favor, so you only got that because of that. Or ones where even with major government grants, like you were talking about, Mina, where governments need to make policies. We have this famous case this year where one of the big grants, they said it's going to be 50-50 led by women and men. And I was saying how on Twitter I saw that there was all this talk about how a lot of men were going to just tick the box for non-binary or women now, just to improve their odds of getting the job. And so you think there's all this wonderful, good intentions, and they're meant to work out, but sometimes they can get gamed. We also talked about the importance of mentoring, of ECRs, and throughout people's careers, and also about women. Women do have voices. We always have had voices. And this is an important thing because we always say, oh, like WREN is to give women a voice, but we do have voices. The problem is that we're not necessarily listened to, or we don't have respect for our opinions. And so when you don't get respect, then you feel like you don't want to stand up again in the future. And so we ended on quite a nice high note from Pavasar, which we really talked about empowerment of women and how we can encourage women to speak up and to have their voices listened to. Okay, so thank you everyone, and let me just do the very quick wrap up of our event. So yeah, thank you to everyone who has given their time today, and also who has presented and who got involved in discussions. So if you were interested and you want to get more involved in the WREN, our network, maybe we've started to ignite a spark in you for more action and change, and maybe you want to bring about a louder and more respected voice for this change. So our nominations to join the WREN committee will be for 2023 to 24 are going to be opening soon next month. So there'll be information going on the website. But in the meantime, if you want to, you can email us at info@thewren.global, and we can send you some more information about various committee positions that are coming up. And so finally, thank you to everybody. Here's our details on social media if you want to keep up with us that way. And also after the Zoom call finishes, there's going to be a Zoom survey that pops up. We'd be really appreciative if you could answer the survey because it will help us to tailor and improve our future events. So thank you, everybody, and have a really great day or a really great evening.